Today we got some snow, which is interesting. If you're from Oregon or from the Valley, you know we don't get snow often. This is pretty typical for Oregon snow too, is like it came on, hit hard, dumped a lot in a short amount of time, and now it's done. It's been about 2.5 hours since it started snowing, and it dropped a solid, I would say, 3 inches of snow. But yeah, anyways, so I had a little mishap, so I'm actually recording the intro to the video at the end of the video, if that makes sense. Like, this will go at the beginning. So we've already got what we needed done today, but yeah, we'll get right into that. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do is inspect your cooler. So do not get anything other than a Motorcraft cooler. The coolers that you will get from Ford will have this in the box. This is, it's an international. That's Max Forces International. So it's an international cooler. It is OEM, so don't freak out by it saying Max Force. But inspect these parts, the cooler right here. I've had it before where they get damaged in shipping, and so you'll have this top part be like all bent over or smashed up or whatever. So you want to make sure that the cooler's not damaged in any way. If it is damaged, there's a good possibility it'll leak. All right, so you got 2 different size O-rings here. Everything will be in your little baggie. So these thicker O-rings that are in the bag, there's 4 of them, 2 different sizes. You got 2 small and 2 big. So your big ones obviously go on first. They go down to the bottom one. This is all fairly self-explanatory. So once you get that on, flip your cooler housing over here. Don't forget about this piece, okay? If you forget about this, you're going to be in for a hard time. Okay, so there's 2 of these small O-rings in here. The bigger one goes in this channel in the housing. The smaller one goes on this. Okay, once you get your O-ring on there, you line up the little hex thing with the housing. Just take your finger and push it in there. So then you need to get the O-rings. There's 2 O-rings, thinner ones. They go down here. I'll show you this here in a minute. Okay, see, you got O-rings, there's 3 in there. Okay, once you get that on, I like to use a light, like thin grease, and you can kind of just put some on the O-rings. If you don't lube these O-rings, you can take a chance, and you can use, try and use something pretty thin. You don't want a lot of this on here. And for anybody who might comment on this and go, you're doing it wrong, don't use grease on that, it's going to get in the cooling system, or whatever. I have been doing it this way for years. I've been doing it this way for probably the last 7 years. And I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of 6-liter oil coolers, and I've never once had an issue doing it that way. You never see any visible grease in the coolant or anything like that. So you want to be careful that your O-rings don't fall out while you're doing this. But then just put the cooler on top, put some body weight on it, and those will pop in there. Don't put the hardware in. So remember, you got your 2 nuts and your 2 bolts that go on the cooler, and bolt it to the housing. Don't pull the cooler into the housing with the hardware. You'll mess things up doing that. And I'm not tightening with this, I'm just running them down. And I'll go grab my ratchet here in a second and actually tighten those. And you can I've done this enough times that I know about how the bolts should feel tightening them. But you can use a torque wrench. I want to say that the torque on them is 16 foot-pounds. So somewhere around 15, 16 is perfectly fine. We can grab the ratchet. Okay, so once those are tight, take your upper housing here, get your gaskets for it. Which gaskets they are is pretty self-explanatory. You got the one that looks like, you guys can tell me what that looks like. Get that in there. Sometimes the O-ring spots, passages, whatever you want to call them, will get in the coolant side, which is that O-ring I just showed you here a minute ago. Sometimes you'll get some like coolant, like crusty buildup stuff that sits in the groove, so you have to take a screwdriver or a pick or something, you know, that's, I guess, somewhat gentle, and kind of scrape that stuff out of there. But so then you're just going to take your hardware and reverse the process here. Bolts back in. So, and you have to be really careful with these. They're not a normal bolt. They're actually like triangular shaped, and they basically make their own threads. So these, I'm pretty sure, don't have any actual threads in the bolt holes when they start off, and these will actually make their own threads. They're kind of like a lock bolt, basically. So you got to be kind of careful with them. You got to make sure that they kind of get centered in there good. Like say, you put in your little ones. I always tighten up the T45s first, and then tighten the T30s up last. I don't know why I do that, but I feel like that's a better thing to do. Again, just kind of running these down so they're snug. For those of you that don't know, these little snap-on impacts, they're great for stuff like this because they put out a decent amount of horsepower, like they're good, but they're not like, oh my God, this thing's got so much horsepower. So like they're hard to like strip hardware out. I don't know why that one wasn't so hard, but whatever. So, and with these, it's always good. These bolts here, I've found that, at least for me and my strength abilities, that grabbing the ratchet kind of up here at the head and snugging them up gives you, about what you need for tightness. I didn't wash this off. I was just going to take some brake cleaner. So I got these two pieces all nice and cleaned up. This one has a little bit of rubber residue on it, so I'm just going to take a green little whiz wheel and clean it up real quick. You got to be careful with these. Don't spend a lot of time in one spot, so you don't want to take a bunch of material off. But it doesn't have to be perfect. You remember you are sealing it with more rubber, so the rubber will take up some of any kind of voids that you have. Just get it good and clean. You can do that with a razor blade too. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see that, but I just cleaned it up good enough to take 90% of what's there off. And so then you got this weird looking, like half egg shaped Mr. Potato Man looking O-ring there, and you stick it in the top part of that. This piece is pretty easy to put on. You just kind of get it on there and just push it down. So, and then same type of process, just push bolts in, tighten them up. It's pretty easy. Not a lot to it. Okay, so then you got your oil filter housing O-ring. I usually leave that out until I'm ready to put the oil filter housing on, just so that way it's not flopping around. And you flip your whole cooler housing over. This is the O-ring that seals it to the block. It's pretty straightforward, self-explanatory, nothing really easy or nothing hard about it. The one thing about these O-rings is you want to try and make sure that you're not going along like this and like pushing the O-ring in, because if you do that, you're stretching the O-ring, and so the O-ring is going to be too big by the time you get done. Specifically in straight sections like that, you'll find that if you do that, you're going to have extra O-ring you have nowhere to go with. So I always start in the center and just kind of push down once you get the center started. This may seem dumb that I'm telling you this, but it just trust me. So once you get that nice and pushed in there, make sure it's all seated in the groove. It's not going to fall out when you flip it over. So you got that. Remember your little brown square O-ring that goes underneath the little plastic tube in the oil filter housing. That back in there, and then you just got your sensors and stuff. If you don't know, this is the front of this basically front of the engine. So this points towards the front. This front hole right here, if you're questioning how these sensors go back in, this front hole here that's in between the oil feed tube hole for the turbo and the oil filter housing, that's the temp sender hole. So this is what the temp sensor looks like. So the temp sender goes there. And this is the pressure sensor. They look completely different. I'll show you side by side. Okay, temp sender, oil pressure. Temp sender goes in your front hole, oil pressure goes in your back one. If I can get it started. Yeah, there we go. Okay, that's all there is to that. It's pretty self-explanatory. These I typically will put them in with an impact. So get your socket on there nice and tight and straight up and down, and then just give it and it's tight. I've had issues in the past with these, specifically the oil pressure sensor, because it's kind of like a special socket. Before I had this special socket, I think this is like 1/16 or something like that, 1/8, I don't know, something like that. When I have used it happened a long time ago, and this is how I learned this, is I used a regular socket on the oil pressure sensor, and even with this socket, like it's designed to be on there, you can take the chance of when you have the ratchet on it and you go to tighten it up, even if you're holding on to it, it can bend over to the side and break the sensor. And so that's where just using it, just a 3/8 drive impact, and you just stick it on there and you just kind of go, make sure I just tighten it up, but you just kind of go a couple little bumps, that's plenty tight enough. Don't go any tighter than that. That's good to go. This is ready to go back in the truck. Got your O-ring, and here's your new screen for the bottom of the cooler housing. So this is ready to go back in the truck. No issues. Shake that out, throw it over the top so no dirt gets in there. All right, guys. Well, I think that hopefully this video wasn't too boring for you. But I think that's pretty much it for this one. I think we've got more than enough footage and me rambling and all that stuff. But we've got a completed product now. So tomorrow morning, I'm gonna go ahead and I'll make sure and clear this SD card out. So at least we'll have some time. I might have to record it on the phone too, whatever. But yeah. So tomorrow morning, we're gonna get back after it. Like I say, this will probably end up being a 3-part deal. Try and get this thing completely buttoned up tomorrow and done. But it needs a new brake controller. The OEM brake controller went bad, so I've got one of those on order. Hopefully it'll be in tomorrow. I'll either go get it tomorrow morning or I'll go get it, what is today, Tuesday? Yeah, so I'll either go get it tomorrow morning or Thursday morning. So that way it can be ready for the guy to pick up on Friday. So, but anyways, guys, have a good one. Like I say, we'll probably see you guys tomorrow. Hopefully, we'll see. Fingers crossed. And we'll get things going, thrown back together. I'll show you how to do the STC fitting too, because that, you know, you'd be surprised at how many people screw that up, to be honest. So, shouldn't be a horribly big deal though. So we'll go ahead and show you guys that, and we'll show you the rest of the process, and hopefully it goes together good. So we will see you guys tomorrow.